Now we move on about on time to the main presentation, which is Arthur, which is our president. Arthur, I've known Arthur on and off now, I guess, and pretty well being on the board now for the last few years, but on and off for about 15 years. He was one of the founders of the Humanists in Silicon Valley. It started off, I think, was it as far back as the 50s? Certainly 60s, right? It started in San Jose and has sort of moved north a little bit in that time. So he's very committed to humanism and the values of humanism. He's written a book that is one of his passions, How to Live the Good Life. He's fascinated, I know, by language and why people believe in the supernatural, and we debate the subject often. But in any case, I look forward to your discussion now on genetic propensities and symbolic language. Arthur.
Before getting into the meat of the thing, talking about heaven and hell, this is something that I believe very firmly. Organized humanism cannot promise that you will go to heaven, but we can guarantee that you won't go to hell. So join up and... The reason that I got involved in this talk was I was reading an article in the Humanist Perspective of Canada, and there was an article by a woman who was putting down evolutionary psychology and sociobiology as just flashes in the pan and going anywhere. They have a libertarian twist up there, and so I think that comes out of that way of seeing things. And I thought, gee, that goes against everything I've been thinking and the whole essence of my book, which I had meant to show you a copy of to prove that it wasn't here, but they never made it in from the car. So as a result of that, I tried to put this talk together, and I labored on it for many, many weeks, and I ended up with some 6 pages of single-space stuff. And then, well, let me just go through what you have in front of you in case. I do not speak extemporaneously, as you might have judged already. So I write it all down, and then I do what I wrote down. So if you have a copy of a thing, you can go home now and read it at your own leisure, unless you want to stick around and bug me at the end about why did I say that. But at any rate, the title of the talk is Human Nature, Genetic Propensities, and Symbolic Language. And as I say, I had originally planned that the core of this presentation would be the ideas I explore in Chapter 1 of my book, How to Live the Good Life, A User's Guide for Modern Humans, including ideas about the meaning of life. I've done a major shift in what I had planned to say here today. This is because I had a close encounter with Rebecca Goldstein and her term mattering. It addresses my point at its deepest level and opens up the conversation in a way my book fails to do. I had meant to lay out in around 20 to 30 minutes of boring analysis of a key element of human evolution, which our species changed when our species changed some 30 to 60,000 years ago with the evolution of symbolic language. And the whole meaning of human nature changed, setting us on a very different trajectory from all other species. And I have a few copies of that original thing for anybody who might want to curious about what I threw out and replaced with this. However, the December-January issue of Free Inquiry had an article by the genius writer Rebecca Goldstein which caught my attention. In her article on feminism and religion, she includes some words about mattering that blew my mind. She laid out the core issues in a way that captured my message at a more understandable level. This boils down to recognizing that the core of religion is to provide people a way to matter. And those are my words, not hers. She doesn't make that sentence, even though she dances around it like a lot of humanist types do. Rebecca explains that mattering issues came up to her in her book, The Mind-Body Problem, which she wrote in 1983, where her character explains it, and this was picked up by Ellen Kaschak, a psychologist who brought it into psychology. I passed on to Roy Speckhart, executive director of the American Humanist Association, my reaction to Rebecca Goldstein's words on mattering. And he responded, essentially overnight, that Andy Norman, a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon University, would be doing a program on mattering at the AHA conference in June in Philadelphia. In checking out Andy Norman, I found his Humanism's Big Picture Mattering Map, and the URL is given at the bottom of the page, or somewhere down there, that apparently has come out of this work. There, Andy Norman says, this infographic dramatizes curious and intellectually significant fact, namely that humanism's core principles all function to illuminate what really matters. Now, I have to admit to you, I studied the infographic very carefully, and it didn't all hang together personally for me, but maybe it's because you need a microscope on the copies that's available to show that. He goes on to say, I now like to think of humanism as a commitment to honest mattering. And this visually engaging diagram that I just showed you illustrates the promise of this interpretation. Thanks to Rebecca Goldstein for the concept of mattering maps and James Laslovich for his design wizardry. There are 10 points laid out there. 1, naturalism. We are part of a natural order composed of matter, governed by laws, all seemingly indifferent to our lives. 2, methodological naturalism. To understand something is to understand how it matters, which is to say, how it fits into this order. 3, Darwinian origins. All life on this planet evolved from a common ancestor. We are all quite literally kin. 4, evolved psychology. Our basic needs, interests, desires, and concerns are those that helped our ancestors survive. Their fulfillment matters to us, but it seems not to the universe. 5, the I matter more illusion. Our personal interests seem like they matter more than the like interests of others. This is an illusion. 6, the will to matter. Among our most basic needs is the need to matter. We need to understand our lives as important, as making a difference. 7, Dennett's secret to happiness. The secret to happiness is to discover something that matters more than you do and devote yourself to it. 8, the sentience principle. The well-being of sentient creatures is the sole root of all real mattering. 9, non-nihilism. Furthering the well-being of sentient creatures is project enough to infuse life with meaning and purpose, providing we allow this world, this life, to matter to us. 10, equality of matter. All human beings matter and matter equally. And for me, Arthur Jackson, all this defines human nature and shows us the way for humanity to reach the place where all causes are understood by everyone as being natural. Well, that's the core of my layout. Now I'm willing to interact with you should that have raised any questions in your mind or promoted you desire to respond with an alternative view of all this. So we're ready to go, and I think we have a hand there if we have a microphone. See, I'm like Lincoln at Gettysburg, you know. I got up there, and it's over before the people are even comfortable in their chairs and say, wait a minute here. We have a little trouble with our microphones, even on a good day.
Somebody turned it off. So remember that wait for me to bring the mic to you. So who had their hand up? Oh, Alex? We have to.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on can you hear me?
I'm ready if you're ready.
Okay, on the 10th point about all human beings matter and matter equally. That's a nice principle for society to follow, but it seems like as an individual, people don't all matter the same, and that's probably a good thing. Just because you're more involved with some people, you know their feelings more. I'd question 10. I wonder if you'd comment on that.
Well, I suspect there are a few people who've looked at this for very long who would not question that. And that's the problem of just having these 10 things laid out here. And since I don't know really what's going on in in the writer's mind, what is that, Andy, whatever, I can't really speak for him, but let me say for me personally, and part of the reason I selected this because it fits so well into my own thinking and how I try to lay it out in my book and deal with every one of these issues in chapters, not just a sentence, which can easily be missed because you think of the wrong thing. In my mind, part of the whole idea that some people don't matter as much as others. For example, in a discussion group online, the question was raised, so does Adolf Hitler matter as much as Charles Darwin? Well, that depends on how you're measuring things. The point of it is, these two individuals started off as embryos in some mother's womb and developed out of that. And what they turned out to be, in my analysis, is very much a product of the society in which they lived and the resources that were made available to them to get to the core of mattering. Obviously, Adolf Hitler was not a person who had much concern for anybody else, which violates at least a couple of points on this thing. But he was a human being, and in my fantasy world, he could have been just as productive as Albert Einstein, or as the rest of you sitting here in this room. So I know that doesn't answer the question, but at least I hope I've danced around it enough. Oh, you have another one.
No, it's not another question.
Mic.
Just to comment on what you said about Hitler. You know, we on some level we should appreciate that he's a human being. There's some reason why he was the way he was, and it's not because it's it's not. We can't assign it to evil. There's a sense in which he's no different from the rest of us.
Exactly. It's a natural, as a result of natural phenomena, which if we knew more about. And the sad thing to me, here we have a society where we stick 2 million people at least into depraved situations called prisons, and yet there's zero interest in really trying to figure out, well, why did this person end up here? And see, in my framework, I say every person is responsible for every act they do, and their society is responsible for everything they do. And if we want to live in a better society, we better look at why people do things that are destructive to other people. And I believe those things are knowable, can be steadied, and can be changed. And I'm not trying to say it's easy to change people. I've tried to change myself sometimes without a lot of success. But at any rate, that's the dimension. Thank you.
Yeah, my question here is that connected with number 10, the survival of the organism, whether human or insect or whatever it is, this love for survival makes us very selfish organism. And this is where we're different from each other.
Okay, I think I missed the core of your question. Can you?
The core is that we are all survivalists. We want to survive. We don't want to die. So we protect ourselves, whether we are a fly or a mosquito or a human. And that's what makes us very selfish.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And the less support we have, the more likely I think we are to react just in a fashion, for my survival, you must die, or you must do whatever. And when we build that dichotomy, and let's face it, this is the way Americans think. I mean, we've all been indoctrinated deeply in this whole idea. We don't share any responsibility for that bank robber. They had free will. Someday I'm going to give a talk on free will, and maybe we can look at it in a more productive way. But the point of it is, and if any of us want to change and want to see things differently, and for my mind, the whole point of humanism is to have a chance, an environment where we can explore ideas. Not a matter of take on anybody else's ideas, but to figure out what works for us based on the best understanding we've developed from all the things we've read, the experiences we've had, and how can we use them in the best way for us, because obviously we're a key part of this thing. I mean, we're not, humanity and us may be equal or every other human beings, but we just have to live our life. And figuring out how to do that is the key. I mean, that's why I wrote the damn book, to figure out what's it all about and trying to get to that depth of understanding. And I succeeded for myself, but so far it hasn't been in a way that seems to impinge on many other people's way of handling things. Is there another victim?
Okay, I'll be the next victim. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about how they intend these 10 points. I think I am still missing that. Is she trying to say, or that if you consider all 10 of these, at least one of these has to be true for some person, or are they all true for everyone, or how do they hang together like that?
Well, I can't answer that in a fair way, the way the question was asked. But I would say, presumably, they make sense to Rebecca Gold. In fact, I don't even know if these are statements of Rebecca Goldstein or of Andy Norman or of some collective whatever. But when I read them, they just resonated so in my mind, so I took them as a working thing. But of course, the core of humanism, just because some wise person says something, doesn't give us any reason to accept it. Oh yeah, I don't think it's right, but I'll accept it because obviously that person knows more than I do, and whatever. And of course, that's the value of interaction. Again, I don't know if I answered the question, but I think we have somebody with the mic. Okay.
I'd just like to make one comment and offer a question to Alex concerning his objection to point number 10. The comment is C.5, and the question is, how would you rephrase point number 10 and then defend the rephrasing morally?
So you were asking me to rephrase number 5? No. For Alex to do it, right? Him do it.
That's right. I'm supporting your position in offering these 10
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
aphorisms and posing a question to Alex. So I guess he gets the microphone next.
Yeah, actually, I was just looking at 5, and the I matter more illusion. I think it's very natural that I should matter more. I mean, I feel the things that hurt me. I don't feel the things that hurt other people, not very, especially if I don't see them and don't know that I've hurt them. Or someone tells me that I've hurt them, and I think, gee, well, that's too bad, but it's not as bad as if I were hurt. And I think that's quite natural, and I think you have to. You can't abandon that completely. You know, you have to live your life with the idea that your feelings are important. I was having a discussion with Laura the other day, and about verbal violence, and what occurred to me is I really like ethnic jokes. You know, there are situations in which you don't tell them. There are people you don't tell that particular joke to, but I still find them amusing, and my brother and I get together and we swap them all the time. And I don't know how much of a sin that is in your eyes.
Well, I think the point we have to recognize is none of us have perfect mental health. Yeah, some people think they do, and that's what number 5 is all about. But the point, but part of the thing is we really haven't had a chance to work through. I mean, we all have those kinds of ideas, and we act on the basis of them, and we've never had an environment where we could have that dumb idea called into question and maybe even convinced us, you know, that really is a dumb idea, but what's a better idea? And that's the point, what's a better idea? And that to me is the exciting thing about this list of things. It's really collectively a better idea, a better way to fit it all together. None of it's perfect, particularly just reading these little sentences, but at least it lays a basis for getting humanism into discussion in a deeper way than we have been up to this point. And that's to me the exciting thing, because humanism is my religion. It's the underlying thing of my life. I mean, that's what keeps me going. And I would like to see it expressed in ways that could resonate with more people at that level, rather than, yeah, well, I don't believe in God and heaven, and so I guess I must be a humanist. Or maybe I'm an atheist. I can't remember. But at any rate, I'm sorry, somebody was...
Arthur, of course, you've taken on a very big subject here, and I like the idea...
You got to see it the other way.
Excuse me. To understand how Hitler, became the person that he was, you have to understand how World War II ended and what a burden that put on the German people, and it gave rise. And Hitler did not have an easy time arising, by the way. And then you have to understand the difference between the way we ended World War I than the way we ended World War II with the Marshall Plan, and made allies out of both Germany and Japan. I just wanted to mention the idea that Bob Gaunt has, that all the children of the world are our children. That we are one, and that to make that leap would have resolved World War I in a very different way. So it's a big subject, but it's a very meaningful subject, and all of us can participate. But it is an extraordinarily difficult thing to see how your list of 10 items work out.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that thing, and this is what came to me after chewing on that question. Adolf Hitler was a partial product of the society in which he raised. And in my mind, at that time, it was a very authoritarian, lockstep. The dad tells you what to do, you do it, whether you want to or not. You hate him for it, but whatever. I don't think that is the Germany of today. I think the Germany that came out of World War II moved to a whole different level as a society. At least that's my take, but I'm not an expert on the subject, but it's what's in my mind at this point. Oh, sorry.
Okay. First, I want to say that I'm immediately subscribed for these 10 principles, but and thank you for putting them together and presenting to us. But my comment is about your number 5, that I might more considered as an illusion. This is not an illusion, or I would say it is more than an illusion, because we are not evolved to care about the whole human race, but we are also not evolved to care only about ourselves. We are actually evolved to care about our offspring, or about our children, about passing our genes to future generations. And so for us it is natural to care more about only a few human beings which are closely related to us, and this is how evolution actually forced us to feel and forced us to live. And we cannot easily dismiss it. We have to accept this as a fact of our nature. And besides that evolutionary origin, it also makes sense because for a few people who we personally know, we also can predict the impact of our actions. We know what is good for them. We know what can we do for them. But it is not easily to extend it for a larger group or even for humankind as a whole, because this predictability is broken. You cannot easily predict what would be the impact of our actions for other people who you don't personally know, and whose condition you don't know, and whose desires you don't know.
Yeah.
So how would you address this contradiction between this number 5 essentially and this whole framework?
Yeah. Well, the whole point of this talk, as I was laying it out, is about what do I claim happened to our species around 30 to 60,000 years ago that moved our species in a different trajectory than all other species. And the whole point of this thing of genetic propensities and symbolic language, to my mind, is the essence of that whole point. It is my belief that almost all species are driven by their genetics. There may be some small amount of learning that is able to take place so the individual can react better. And I haven't come to grips with the limits of that thing. But for human beings, once symbolic language was evolved, that is something no other species has. Because of our ability to think of things and to share those things puts us in a whole different domain. And to my mind, that's the domain that I would hope humanism gets into in a deeper way, so that we really can live in a way congruent to our own life. See, to my mind, to think we're the important person and everybody else matters less, right up to the point. Well, if it would be to my advantage in my current level of thinking for that person to die or to be tortured, why not? They really don't matter. It's really only me. And yet we're a social species. Our life is tied up with the life of our species. Now, when you get just a few of us together, like 150 or 200, whatever, which of course is the framework in which our species evolved, the hunter-gatherer style of living was going on long before Homo sapiens sapiens came into being. And And if you look at how human beings behave, you see, okay, what's life really about to us when we live in a small group, a hunter-gatherer group, where we have to protect ourselves from others. You know, the whole us-them thing. What does us mean? Us means my group, my family, whatever, however you cut it down. Some people, us just means me. And that's sort of the core of this kind of thing. But the point of it is, if you're living at that level, to my mind, you're living a deprived life. As I look at people, and I see people that look like the kind of person I'd like to be, I see people who are interacting honestly and supportively and helpfully, and in that environment, I think our true humanity comes out. The humanity we evolved in, which is the hunter-gatherer group. Now, the reality is, once symbolic language was evolved, the hunter-gatherer group was no longer an adequate way to live, even though they continued living that way up until the rise of civilizations, when everything got confusing. And Rebecca goes into that dimension in a way that I hadn't seen before when that happened. But the point of it is, they were just dancing around, we have these genetic needs that come out of our physiology. We can overcome that if we have a good reason to. And we see people doing that all the time. Sometimes they seem to be unique, and we say, oh yeah, I couldn't do that. I thought I could walk on a tightrope, but I tried it and found out I can't do it. But the point of it is, nobody's born able to walk on a tightrope. It takes a hell of a lot of work. And to my mind, living in the proper way takes a hell of a lot of work. But we have to know what it's all about. I mean, why is it worth the work? And to my mind, if we can build a community where we truly are part of it, we get to that basic need, you can't live in that kind of society if you think, well, let me say it a different way. The paper that I had meant to give on this gets into the whole genetic propensity thing. And two of those genetic propensities that I was dealing with in that thing is the alpha propensity and the us-them propensity. And it is my conclusion that there are at least a couple of kinds of alphas, and whether that's totally genetic or has to do with other things, I call them alpha A's, which alpha abusers, and alpha C's. That's alpha compassion. Some people have the innate ability to be leaders, and everybody's willing to follow them, because human beings, as social beings, we have a weakness for authoritarian subservience behaviors. And sometimes we get locked into that, in which we are very easy to follow anybody who wants to be a leader. Say, okay, yeah, just tell me what to do, I'll be there. But to my mind, when we understand those genetic pushes on us, through symbolic language gives us the power to do it differently. And to my mind, that's what we need to do, to build a different society. Because what I call the light at the end of the tunnel means human being just hasn't been behaving randomly. World War II was not just a random event. To my mind, we're on a learning curve. We were born in ignorance 30 to 60,000 years ago when we gained the ability to use language, and we're trying to figure out what's this all about. And to my mind, up to this point, nobody has really looked at the thing in a proper way. I mean, a lot of people have tried to make sense out of history and put it into some kind of framework, but none of them, in my mind, have gotten it right. And you won't believe this, but I think I did. You can laugh now. But the point of it is, it's about gathering data. It's about benefiting from our mistakes. And we all have the capability of doing that, because if we look over, and you know, there are those people, like Tony Robbins and whatever, said, hey, a mistake is a fantastic opportunity to learn. You should treasure that. If you're not making mistakes, it means you're not trying. You're just floating along. That counters, of course, our whole indoctrination period, where if you make a mistake, you have to go stand in the corner and you never be forgiven. I mean, why are all those people in prison? $40,000 a year. More than it would have cost to give them welfare or whatever. It's the matter they made a mistake, they got to pay for it. That's the kind of people we are. Pay for your mistakes is the only way to prevent mistakes, and yet we see societies that do that. Why do we have the worst prison system in the world? The United States prison system, and California in particular, more recidivism than any other country. And if you look at the prison systems, it's clear why. They don't see a person who makes a mistake as unforgiven. They see it as a person who made a mistake and is capable of learning how to overcome that mistake and not repeating it. And yet we build a system where we force people to repeat their mistakes because we don't give them any other options unless they're really unusual. I'm sorry, I get carried away sometimes. Do we have a...
Arthur, yeah.
Oh, Martin.
Hi. Yeah, so you sent this out last week, and so I had a bit of an advantage over others to look at it. But first of all, on 5, I guess a lot of this is semantics. But the word illusion and personal interest or illusion here just seems, frankly, nonsense to me. I mean, the way I see it is all I know is my interests in my own brain, and hopefully if I'm wise or if I'm kind and compassionate, then those interests include the interests of others, right? And hopefully in a kind, well-meaning society, everybody has as part of their interests the interests of others and can give a good part of their time to considering the interests of others, but they're still their interests. It's a sort of subset of interests in my mind. So I mean, maybe I just don't understand the words or I interpret them differently, but 5 just, I find simply nonsense. 10, I think equality of mattering, you have to define what mattering means, and then you have to give it a subject. So again, does mattering mean the emotional, or does mattering mean the material? I've always thought it's the material, that's why it's called mattering. For example, if somebody says to me, oh, you're wonderful, Martin, I really appreciate you, I'll feel good. In a sense that matters, but in strictly to the word, the way I define it, it doesn't matter because it's just making me feel good for a moment. It's not feeding me or clothing me. So if we define it as clothing and feeding and material benefit, then you have to define matter with regards to what? I mean, I want to go to the short term or the long term. If I want to go to England to see my parents at Christmas, so I'm going to get on a plane and go there because that matters to me. If mattering to me, saving the planet matters more, I'm going to not burn the fossil fuels, and I'm not going to go to England, and I'm going to put mattering about the planet in 300 years ahead, mattering about my parents and seeing them in 2 weeks. So, I mean, and unfortunately, you can say all human beings matter equally. Well, I'm sorry, but a homeless person doesn't matter to me in terms of getting to England at Christmas as much as the guy that flies the 777 that gets me to England. So while I agree we need to be compassionate and we need to help each other all we can, in a practical sense, of course, not everybody's equal. Of course, some people, in terms of feeding us and clothing us and housing us and maintaining the transportation for us, are much more important than others, depending on our own values and what we want to do in the context of how long we want to do them. So, you know, while I'm all for humanism, I think they can exist in a brain in an ideal form, but in practical world, they don't have any meaning to me, at least those two.
Well, all I would say is I'm sure most people in reading this over would not agree with it, and they would find different ones to point out is unacceptable or whatever. And I'm not willing to be the evangelical going out and say you must accept these 10 or whatever. but I think they're all like, if Andy was here to explain them, he could do a better job than I. So I'll just accept yours. I saw a couple of hands go up.
Okay, just so you know, there's a lot of people in front of you. We're taking you in the order that you have put your hands up, even though you don't think so. So,
And if I'm keeping the list, so if you get my good eye contact with me, make sure, and I nod at you that you're on my list, which you two are, then you're on the list. Well, actually, Laura.
She said she didn't want to.
We have a committee deciding who's on the list.
Don't.
Arthur, I think when I'm looking at this list, I see 3 items. I think they're in the category of objective truth, whatever that means. Naturalism, Darwinian origins, and evolved psychology. The others seem to be a matter of subjectivity. It's each person decides for themselves what matters to them. But those 3 items, they're valid no matter what people matter, what they think matters. But I think there might be another objective point here, and it has to do with whether the survival of the species matters to people. It seems to me that it doesn't matter enough to people the way it is today. So I think unless a lot more people decide it matters to them that the species survive, we won't survive. I think we got global warming, the nuclear danger, and things like that. And there's very little discussion about those things. You see on television people talking about what matters to them. And they don't talk about the big issues about saving the world. So I think this is a real problem.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. My take, and let me share with you, I happen to have problems with point 8 and 9. Even yet, I think for many persons, they'd say, yeah, of course. And I won't get into that, but I would hope that underneath my alternative to that, there is some data, there is some experimental data that would support seeing things in a different way. And I'm sure you're right that many of these have that element. But as a place to start, I mean, I think this is a damn good place to start. But I'm sorry, if somebody has a...
Arthur, I think I see things exactly as you do, so I don't have a question, but I want to add to genetics. Yesterday on KQED, they interviewed a professor from McGill University, and I won't go through the whole thing, but there's a thing called epigenetics, which shows that animals, if they have an experience, it's transmitted to their children and their grandchildren. The experience itself. Well, I'll try to say it quickly. A mouse is shocked when he gets a certain odor, and they wait till he has grandchildren, and when the grandchildren are brought to that odor, they're shocked. The example he gives is that if you grow up in an aggressive family, you will be aggressive. So there's 2 things. There's regular genetics in the gene, which takes centuries or millennium to change, but there are epigenetics, that's like the junk DNA. When someone has a strong experience, their children and grandchildren will have this. So we have both of these to contend with.
Yes, there's many different dimensions, and we could spend years talking about all of them, and we'd come out wiser people, probably.
Have you considered the writings of George Lakoff, University of Berkeley? He's a linguist.
I've considered reading his books, and
yeah.
I do, and I think they're great.
Yeah, and it seems like some of the things when he works with how people make their frameworks on deciding what matters to them. thought that would also be a good reference for this subject.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, no, and that's the whole point. There's so many things to deal with. How do you sort through them and get to a point that really is helpful in living our life? And to my mind, I found this helpful in a way of having a perspective, which for me is a naturalistic perspective. In other words, if we really can gather enough data, I think we can do things differently.
Yeah, my turn, I guess. I'm trying to how to phrase this. On Center for Inquiry, underneath Center for Inquiry, it says secular humanist, which I believe I am. This format doesn't really talk about secularism too much. I've never heard the 10 principles of secularism. Perhaps they're out there.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we should work on them.
Yeah, Paul Kurtz has done it.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Kurtz? Yeah, okay. And I think secularism is the best way to express humanism to people that are kind of completely unaware. They just have their belief systems, and then they don't, when they bump into our kind of belief systems, they just ignore it or are shocked by it or whatever it is. So when I first came here, I mentioned that I really would like to coin the flip, that when somebody, and again, I'm going back to politics, because we need, as the man behind us says, we got a very, very dangerous world. I've been reading a lot about Gaia lately, which is sort of an interesting form of religion, which I think kind of fits in with secular humanism in a way. So what we really want to do using secularism and with humanism as our foundation, have politicians run that if they tell you that they need to pray to get an answer, don't vote for them.
Well, if you read the next Humanist magazine, which isn't out yet, and look at Humanist Network News, you'll find that the American Humanist Association has actually set up a 501c4 group in the political domain, and is already supporting candidates who seem consistent with an understanding of humanism. So I do see some very positive things going on, and I hope that this will come into the whole chain and move things in an even better way, more faster.
I have a comment. You brought in very good point that we survive by protecting ourselves, and we survive by having the support of other people. So we need a society. And this society has to have a culture that provides for the security of the self of each one in society. And if it's not provided, there will be revolt, there will be wars, there will be class system, inequality. So what we need is a good ideology which provides at least the most substantial way of surviving, so that we'll have a peaceful society and cooperative, because we know we cannot survive without the support of others. And our leaders here are responsible. We need a good ideology.
Yeah. And again, to my mind, if you want to understand what's really in the hearts of human beings, you need to look at a hunter-gatherer group and see what goes on there. Of course, if you do that, you find out all different kinds of things go on there, but there are some key things. And to my mind, one of them is human beings are social animals. We are mammals. According to Ashley Montague in his book Touching, no mammal will survive without being touched in a special way by its mother. Now, at his level of research, he didn't find anything in human beings that equated to that. So he was a little confused by it. But the point is, We all need physical affection. We need cuddling. We need touching. That's at the core of what it means to be a mammal in touch with what they really are. And yet we build a society where if you touch a person, they may freak out. Now maybe that have something to do with the Harvard research on monkeys. You deprive them of touch, and touch becomes a painful thing to them. Maybe we've individually, because what kind of families do we have? I mean, how many of our families were able to even understand the important things we needed? Most of them were trying to scrabble around to make a living, and maybe even not have time to even recognize we were still there. But the point of it is, these things can be overcome. See, and to me, that's the fantastic. Here we are at the pinnacle. We have so many things we could do if we could marshal our resources, but we can't even accept a health care program as being a good thing for our society to have. Why? There's reasons. Many of you know what they are.
Going back to quality of mannering, it says here, all human beings matter and matter equally. I take that as meaning that they all have certain basic rights, more or less that the way they're treated, their freedoms that they have or don't have in relation to the rest of humanity. And I see them all as being equal in that respect. Every person, every individual is different, but their rights are equal. And that is sometimes forgotten about. Many people, you know, always an important person, so he has greater rights, or they're more religious or less religious, or they're evil, or they're prisoners. They're people who made mistakes. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think back on some of my mistakes and say, wow, if I'd have been caught, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be probably running around some prison somewhere.
I just want to make another comment. We are giving preference to people that haven't spoken first, and then we'll get to the people who have already done so.
You mentioned earlier about the propensity of people to follow leaders, and as though that were a bad thing. And I think isn't it just the other side of the secret to happiness is to discover something that matters more than you do and devote yourself to it. That's what they think they're doing, and it must be rather difficult in the midst of a enthusiastic bunch of contemporaries to go against that and say, wait a minute, this is not really worth all our time and energy.
Yeah. Well, when you make a statement, it's so easy to give it a spin or to hear a spin, and obviously the power of being a human being is we are social animals, which means we work together. And some people can make better decisions and are more effective persons to follow than others. But it's a matter, the blind following is the issue in my mind. And in my ideal world, all of us would be able to develop so that we can fit into the group, not as just somebody who does whatever you say, do that, and they do it, but that it is their internal conversation, and you come up with reasonable answers and that whole kind of thing. But we get into a lot of difficult things when we get to that conversation.
Okay, so I have about, 17 questions, but I'll just stick with one. Actually, it's not really a question, but what came up for me as I read this list the first time is number 7. When I've been really down, number 7 just does not work for me. And people used to suggest it. Oh, go find something and, go pour your life into that. And it's like, why? That never resonated for me. So the thing, I'll just throw this comment out to add to this mix. I think, I heard this talk, maybe some of you know this woman that writes for, I think it's the New Yorker, Lauren McFarker? She did a talk at Stanford about a year ago called extreme morality. And she was interviewing people for her book. It's coming out in 2014. And one of the women, she read the story of one of the stories in the book, this woman that had a morality where number 10 was true to the extreme for her. Everybody's father was as important as her own father. And she considered every decision she made, every penny she spent, every minute of time she spent doing something or being with a person, she went to that extreme. It was really, really an interesting talk. But that made me, like, I think I probably cast a pretty far empathy net, but not anywhere near what she did. Right? So that just brings me back to the comment I'm going to make is I'm looking at this list of 10, and I know some don't matter to me, and I actually see us all as like different like voting mechanisms in the bacteria that is humanity. And we're all like deciding like how do I feel about this? What is important to me? Is it just me, or is it just a few people around me? Is it my village? Is it my country? We all draw these different lines, and basically I think it's just, I don't mean this in a crass way, but I do look at it this way, that we're all making different judgments and making different actions and basically casting votes throughout the days, throughout our years, and changing the terrain of what it means to be human. And I don't really see us all ever one day all of a sudden doing it all the same, but I think it's all these different factions voting against each other, if you will, but I don't mean that in a harmful way. It's just like we're all basically standing up for what we believe, whether or not we even realize it. Even those who are quiet, they're still making a mark on how things should be. So I think it's just hugely complex. This is a great start at like tearing it apart and looking at the pieces of it, but it's just huge. And the person I was 20 years ago versus who I am now, you know, it's very, in some key ways, very different. Anyway, there's not really a question, but I mean, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Obviously, there's more to our individual life than be captured in just reading these 10 things. And many of us are in a place of recovery in which we're trying to get out of a bunch of garbage that was put in our heads and how to survive it. And that's just the way it is. But maybe in 3 generations we could.
Arthur, I just wanted to suggest on the issue of what matters, that for me, what matters is has a lot to do with the particular circumstances under which I find myself. I'd be willing to bet that 3 months from now that 777 pilot isn't going to matter to Martin anymore. And so whether I'm thinking strictly of what's most important to me and I'm going to fulfill my wishes right now, or whether I'm thinking in terms of my family unit or the community unit, it depends on the circumstances and the time and things like that. So it's not fixed. And so sometimes I'm selfish and other times I'm not so selfish.
Okay. Is this going to be the last question? 5 minutes. Okay.
Again, this is a peripheral comment based upon what I've heard during this discussion, and this reverts back to you, Arthur. You remarked that there was a propensity for people to freak out if they are touched. And I would like to comment that, in my opinion, that is a propensity of people born and brought up in the United States. It is not a general human reaction, in my experience. And I discovered this reaction, to my astonishment, when I immigrated to this country. I think that qualification is important to recognize.
Yeah. Human beings have a weakness to generalize and also to create dichotomies. You know, and And to my mind, that's the essence of the free will determinism argument, creating a dichotomy where it's not a dichotomy. But that wasn't related to your comment. It was.
No, forget it.
Oh, anybody else have, some people are losing it. So, okay. I'm going in as fast as I can see the hands rose up.
Just to balance that comment made by Peter, I was very comfortable not being touched till the age of 30 in England. I came here and people kept grabbing and hugging me, and it was very strange.
He got his hand up. Here you go, Bob.
Arthur, I was just wondering if the most important aspect of this is our international relations as to, we are so, we prepare so much for war, and of course this nation has been in wars for the last 15 years now or more. Well, and it seems that if we were preparing for peace and had some sympathy and compassion for other nations, and weren't out there trying to bring home all of the goodies for ourselves. That's changing, by the way. But in international relations, maybe we really need a one-world concept.
Yeah, and I would hope that all humanists have the idea of one world. We're not, just because we happen to be born at a great time in a great place, that was sheer luck. It had nothing to do with anything that's truly deep in us. We just happened to luck out. Now maybe we'll get lucky and die before the whole thing falls apart.
I want to bring up one aspect of what matters to us. Sometimes I can say something to myself, something matters to me, and yet not act on it. This is, I think, what psychologists call denial type 2. You say something's important, but you behave as if it isn't. And there was even a study done by the Physicians of Social Responsibility in the 80s. They found that about 80% of Americans thought there was a real danger of nuclear war. It's really important. It was the #1 issue. When they were asked what they were doing about it, they didn't read about it. They didn't try to find out what the politicians thought about it. They didn't talk to people. Didn't read. So they behaved. They said it was important, but they behaved as if it wasn't important. And I think we can do that in our personal lives and society as a whole. We can say we aspire to the greater good of humanity and yet do nothing about it. So this is a psychological issue.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the last question. Hilton, are we real close now? Okay.
Me again. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think today what we have is a very competitive culture and emphasizes individualism. This is why most of us cannot see the truth behind what your points here. We need a compassionate, gentle culture that understands the need of everybody in society. Yeah. That's my final. Anybody?
Right, and of course we've...
Be real short.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just when you say we're social animals, I like to tell people we're herdable animals. And I think we're very much herdable as bison, and it's just the way to think about it.
Well, what about the statement that you can't herd humanists? Humanists, they're like cats. You just can't herd them.